So you want to produce 80s music. We're talking lush analog synths, punchy gated drums, thick bass lines, and that distinct retro atmosphere that feels like a lost nostalgic memory. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do that. What is up, YouTube? This is Magneon, and welcome to a brand new tutorial video. I know it's been a little while since I've gotten around to making a proper one, but I had this idea the other day, and I thought it would be a lot of fun. And so yeah, let's get right into this. So before we jump into any sort of production, I first want to talk about what we mean by 80s music. Because what some people might call 80s music, other people might not call 80s music. And just saying 80s music isn't really a genre. 80s music is more so just an era of music that has a very distinct sound to it that I think a lot of people can pinpoint when they hear a certain style of instrument, whether it be, like I said earlier, the gated drums, analog synths. But depending on when you're born, you might have a completely different idea of what 80s music is compared to maybe your parents. For me, for example, I was born in the year 2000. I did not live through the 80s, but my kind of definition of what I would consider to be 80s music comes from my parents, who did live through the 80s, and a lot of what they listened to influenced my music taste, which included bands like The Cure, artists like Prince, Michael Jackson, Aha, Peter Gabriel, just a few names that come to mind as I'm recording this. And I find just in general, a lot of the times nowadays, when you ask maybe somebody younger what they think 80s music is, they'll usually go towards that sort of synth pop, new wave sphere of music, rather than what other people might consider 80s music, such as, Guns N' Roses or, hair metal, something like that. It's kind of funny because I find that nowadays a lot of people falsely believe that synthwave, or what we call synthwave today, was what was popular back in the 80s, and that really wasn't the case at all. But synthwave definitely does have its roots in what was popular in the 80s. So that's just the definition that I wanted to make of 80s music before we get into the real meat of this video. So let's delve into the production by talking about sound selection, because this is what makes the genre, no denying that. I find that some people who are new to this style of music get kind of intimidated because they think that they need tens of thousands of dollars in analog synths and gear, and that is not the case whatsoever. In fact, if I was starting from zero, I wouldn't really worry too terribly much about plugins, especially effect plugins. Synths like Serum and Vital have huge user bases for preset making and stuff, and there are a lot of packs out there that have these kinds of analog synth recreations. And just in general, Serum is very, very good for making these kinds of sounds. Like, it's not really too difficult to make like an analog synthwavy kind of sound, and I'll show you real quickly how to do that right now. You can just take two saw waves, for example, and you fine-tune them maybe by a few cents, and then in the global section here, there's a voice control called Subtle Analog. Add a bit of attack and release on it, and you're already getting something resembling, an 80s analog synth. So these kinds of sounds really aren't that difficult to make. But if you're looking to produce something that's closer to being authentic, I can definitely give you some good recommendations. I would definitely recommend checking out anything by Arturia. You can even get a subscription for Arturia's Collection 11 Pro on Splice, which includes all of these plugins, and it's actually rent to own, so you can pay it off over time. But They have all of these really amazing analog synth recreations, and you can also buy them individually if you want. But these are very faithful recreations of the original synths, and they have a boatload of presets that you can choose from. The DX7, for example, is definitely up there with one of the more iconic 80s synthesizers. Now, there is a free Yamaha DX7 emulation that is objectively the best emulation on the market. The only problem is that the user interface is a fucking nightmare, and to some people might not be worth it. So also the Oberheim XA is another very popular 80s synth that you can find plugin emulations for. Again, there is a free version. Only problem is that it's only VST2 compatible. So if you wanted VST3, you would have to pay for it. But Cubase doesn't support VST2 anymore, but I got the Arturia V collection. You know, it all works out at the end. Some other worthwhile plugins to look for if you're willing to spend some cash, definitely look into getting romplers like Xenology or Nexus. Nexus actually has a Sounds of the 80s pack that you can buy for it. And there's actually a lot of really good presets in here that you can choose from. They're not the most authentic, but there's definitely certain sounds in here that will come in handy if you're interested in that. Another instrument plugin I can highly recommend is BA1 by Baby Audio. This is a very inexpensive plugin, and it's a very straightforward synth too. Like, it's super easy to design what you want. It even has its own randomize button, which I think is really cool. Just a way to get endless presets if you want. And if you're looking to incorporate real instruments in your music rather than just synthesizers, definitely invest in Kontakt and some Kontakt libraries. I know, for example, you can get some very realistic sounding brass instruments inside of session horns. And also, Evolution Flatwood Bass is a very, very good bass guitar library for Kontakt. And you can also get a pack. This isn't realistic instruments necessarily, but there's also a pack called Decatcher. I think I'm pronouncing that terribly. Hit Sounds of the 80s by Frank Perez. And this includes a whole bunch of presets from popular 80s songs that you might be able to recognize from many, many different artists, like the Van Halen Jump preset. Going to effects plugins, as I was saying earlier, if I was starting from zero, I wouldn't really worry too much about getting effects plugins or any kind of analog processing VSTs, unless you're really trying to chase that authentic sound. But you can kind of emulate a lot of analog effects just by using stock plugins. But again, if you are willing to spend some money, I can give you some recommendations. A really, really good recommendation I can give right off the bat would definitely be Super VHS by Baby Audio. Again, not a very expensive plugin. It has a really nice chorus setting, and you can add drift, saturation, and some reverb to it, as well as vinyl or tape crackle and some downsampling. Also, Universal Audio has a whole bunch of really good analog style compressors like the 1176 AE or the LA2A silver compressor. Highly recommend those for, general compression needs, especially if you're working with drums or something like that. And some good saturation plugins would be great too. I definitely would recommend getting Saturn II by FabFilter. I know some people say FabFilter is very expensive, but 100% worth it if you are willing to spend the money. Again, Saturn II is very good for like tape saturation or any other kind of saturation needs. Also, one last recommendation in terms of audio effects, I would definitely recommend investing in Melda Production for plugins like Turbo Comp, which actually has a whole plethora of vintage style compressors that are fully customizable. I know some people say Melda plugins are very intimidating, but trust me, it is really, really cool the amount of stuff you can do with this. And I can also always recommend this for reverb, Valhalla Vintage Verb. They have a literal 1980s color preset, which I use all the time because it's just a nice kind of downsampled sort of reverb that you can put on anything and it sounds great. Definitely my favorite reverb. So with that all out of the way, let's jump into some production and stop my rambling, because I'm sure you want to get to the actual production side of this video. So let's make a 80s style beat from scratch. So I'm going to set the tempo to 100 because I think that's a pretty good starting tempo. And maybe I'll adjust it later, but we'll see what happens. And I'm just going to start off by adding just a piano. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll do an electric piano. That's the sound I'm looking for right there. Now, if you're short on inspiration starting off, I have some techniques for you. On Splice, you can find packs by this label known as Neon Wave. Highly, highly recommend because you can go to like any pack here that they have. Electric Sunset is a good one, for example, and just click Song Starters. And there you go. You got instant inspiration. Usually what I'll do is I'll just download it, drag it into my project, and then I'll just kind of copy the chords, and then I'll change some notes around. That way I'm not 100% stealing. But maybe not everybody wants to do that, so I'm not going to do that for this scenario, but that is just a suggestion that I have. If you want to do something from scratch, that's what we're going to do right now. Now, I'm not really focused on the key that I'm in when I'm first composing. I just kind of do what sounds good. I don't really tend to focus on keys too much anymore until it actually kind of comes down to matching samples that I find online. But for the most part, when I'm just composing in the beginning, I do not worry about the key I'm in. So when I'm writing chords, when I'm starting to write chords, I always start with the bottom, with the bass notes first, and then I put something on top. Because it's usually when we're singing, if you were to hum a chord progression, most of the time you're hearing, I find that most of the time, at least for me, I'll be humming the top note. That's the one that you kind of hear the most. You kind of associate the most out of the chord. So I'll find something that kind of works with C1. I think I'll just do like kind of a 3-chord progression. Don't think the 4 chords are always super necessary. So I'm thinking da, 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 da. And I want to offset this last chord here. Well, let's put these higher notes up higher because I don't think they need to be that low. And now the chords are already coming together. Oh yeah. These cluster chords here, where the notes are like maybe only like 2 semitones away from each other, maybe even just one sometimes if it's in the same scale, they add a whole bunch of emotion to the chords. I just want to make it clear, by the way, I'm not a music theory expert and I'm not like a classically trained pianist or anything. So all of what I'm doing right now just comes from purely intuition and experience. Oh yeah. This is already giving me, this is already making me feel, give it some funky vibes here. Now, just to make this not sound super static, I'm going to humanize this a little bit with a MIDI modifier preset. So let's add in a bass line. So I'm going to do like a kind of classic DX7 bass because that's a very 80s sound that I just absolutely adore. Oh no, it's doing that bug that I hate. The DX7 plugin has this bug that just kind of cuts off the rest of the interface and it annoys the crap out of me, but I'm not going to go through all the trouble of trying to get this to work again because I'm recording a video. That's the sound right there. Okay, and then to make a funky bass line, we'll start just kind of by copying the bass notes of the chord progression. We'll put them in here. And you can have some swing in here if you want. I really like the Cubase swing settings that you have in here. It's very intuitive and it kind of works on the grid as well, which is awesome. So you can like make sure it works with everything that you use in your song. So I'm gonna put on something a little kind of conservative, like we'll just do 20. So you can usually kind of, what I usually do is I kind of hum the bass line as I'm working with the chord progression. So I think this is pretty good for a bass line. So let's add some more instruments here to thicken this up. So let's add a brass. And let's start adding some effects. I want to add some reverb and some delay. And I have this preset here, nice 80s hall. And I want to add one more reverb. I want to add a nice kind of like room reverb to the bass to kind of really make it pop, you know? But just very subtle for the bass. And make sure the low end is removed. Also, I might as well process this bass a little more. Just add a bit of compression to it. And I think this brass here could use a bit of processing too. Okay, so let's add some more instruments to this. I'm going to add in kind of like a bell, a nice bell sound, because there is this one bell preset inside of Zenology that I really, really like. I don't think it's that one. It's this one. Yeah. For melody writing, when it comes to this kind of music, I highly recommend getting a MIDI keyboard of some kind if you don't already have one. Like I said earlier, you don't need to be a classically trained pianist. You just need intuition. And in this case, you also need to know some basic hand movements on some piano. But if you can figure out the scale, which I was able to do, you can start writing melodies and you can get pretty inspired pretty fast, at least I find. I think I have an idea going here. Let's see if I can record that. And let's send this to our hall verb and our delay. Let's add another layer to this bell preset here. This is when the Super VHS comes in super handy. Let's add some more layers. I want to add a pad. There we go. Just like that. I want to add a retro chorus effect in here for this pad layer, but I also want to add it to one of the chords in here. If you're looking for a 100% free Juno chorus emulator, this is the one to go to, Tal Chorus LX, 100% free, very, very good plugin. I see like people use this all the time. It's amazing. And actually this company also has their own Juno emulator, which I figured I might as well show because while I'm on the same topic, this is another plugin I forgot to mention earlier, but this is also very affordable and it sounds pretty good too. One thing you can never forget with this is you got to put in some guitar. By the way, this is the best, most realistic guitar plugin you can buy by Ample Sound. They have a whole bunch of different kinds, but very, very good plugins if you want like a very realistic sounding guitar. They even do like slide between notes. It's awesome. And there's like a strumming section and a tablature section. It's so good. That sounds stupid, but let's see if I can work with it. Add some guitar rig. This isn't very vintage per se, but I do like to have some fuse compressor on this because very customizable kind of OTT compressor that you can use to tighten things up, as I say, as I select the tighten up preset. This is pretty good sounding so far. Let's finally add in some drums. I just realized I didn't really go over drum selection too well, but if you're looking for some good drums, obviously, as I said earlier, Neon Wave on Splice is very good for this kind of stuff. Very good label for Splice sounds if you want like any kind of 80s sounding drums. The Midnight sample pack, I love the Midnight. The Midnight, I have been listening to the Midnight for such a long time, and the fact that they finally have their own sample pack is amazing because they do a lot of very authentic stuff. There is a ton of very, very good drums in here that you can choose from. I especially really like the kicks, so I think I'm going to pick one from here. That's a good one. Now I think I want to do kind of a more fast pace drum rhythm instead of something slower. In fact, I might even crank up the tempo just a little bit again, maybe like 115, and see how that sounds. Cool. Let's add another sampler. Call it snare. Retro City Pops are another very good pack, mainly because I like the snares. Now, the most important part of 80s drums, you got to do this every single time with the kick and snare at least. We're going to do a gated reverb for the drums. And I'm using Shaperbox because it has a preset here that I just think sounds really good for this. Only thing with this is that you have to do a bit of EQing. It sounds a little bit too bright, and I don't want the low end. I do want it over here. Very nice. I'm going to set up the sidechain now too. I know a lot of people might say sidechain is not really authentic for this kind of style of music. And you kind of got a point there, but I think, you're using modern production tools. You might as well do some things that objectively make the mix sound cleaner, unless you're, being really crotchety about it. But at that point, why don't you just use a whole bunch of analog gear, So we don't need this at 100%. Do not put it at 100%. Maybe like 40 to 60, maybe 70. But the bass, on the other hand, the bass gets its own special sidechain, kilohertz compactor, which is what some people would call ring mod sidechain. Now, I'd have some people arguing this isn't necessary, but I think, again, if it helps the mix down, just use it, What this basically is going to do is it's going to sculpt the waveform of the kick into the compactor perfectly so that it like the amplitude of the bass follows the amplitude of the kick is basically what it's doing. I don't think this is a true ring mod sidechain, but it's very similar. It does a very similar thing. So what I'll do is I'll kind of do the same setup here, but we'll use it from the kick only because this is going to the bass. And you can hear that kind of crunchy sound as the sidechain working. I think ISP mode is more accurate than peak. And I don't really think it matters that you hear those kind of artifacts because, you know, it's just the bass line, and the bass line's very top heavy, so it's not really that big of a deal. So let's add some more layers to this snare here. Very, very, very good pack that I can recommend is F9 Electric Funk. Has a lot of good sounds that can translate to this kind of music. Specifically, I want these Prophet claps. Put Prophet clap 1 here, Prophet clap 2. And then you pan them hard left and you pan them hard right, and then you select them both, and we can just kind of fade them. Add some bite to the snare. Some bite and some top end, and we can just copy and paste that. And then I want to add one more thing. We'll do like a pre-shift clap. Actually, I'll use a pack that I got very recently from a very good vaporwave producer, Macro Blank. His new this sample pack here he's got. Got some very good samples. This one. And that one. And then just kind of line them up, something like that. And then go into the mixer here, and we'll do the same thing. We'll link these together, and we'll pan them, maybe not the same amount. It's kind of subtle. Kind of subtle. I think I want these to have like their own kind of distinct reverb. We'll do that. Go to non-linear. This is good for like gated drums, the setting, non-linear. Very nice. And then we'll add a kick and snare. On the kick and snare group, sorry, I want to do some compression. So I'm going to use 1176. This is very good for drums. And the settings I like to put it at, I actually use this all the time, not even just on 80s music. This plugin specifically, put it on slow, click this little slow icon here, and then turn the release all the way up. Shift click, turn on ratios 2 and 4, and then just put the input up. And then what I like to do to just smear the transients a little bit, put some Saturn 2 on it. With the warm tape. I find it like just smears the transients nicely at a nice low amount. That's awesome. I need some loops to go underneath now, so I'll add a brand new folder. And we'll put this under here, and then we'll add in some loops. Because I don't feel like making them myself, and it's okay to use loops, guys. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Nobody's gonna fight you. If they do, they're in the wrong. Chuck this bad boy in here. Add in a shaker. Gotta add in some percussion too. And I want to put it on gated drum verb. Get a nice tambourine hit up in here. That's pretty sweet. I'm going to add a bit of processing here to the instrument bus just so I can get it to sound really nice and even. We're going to use Neutron. I have a preset that I use in this kind of stuff. And Turbo Comp is awesome for this because it has this SSL preset here. Just some slight compression. Whenever you're compressing multiple things at once, like on a bus or something, don't over compress. You always want to do small amounts of compression just to even things out. I want to add all of these into a group track called Clap Snare, just because I want to add a soothe to the whole thing, because I think that the top end is just a little bit too harsh. And I don't think this needs the attack. These claps need the attack. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I think I'm going to leave it at that. That's pretty much how I would go about making an 80s type beat. This is really cool. I really like this. I might work on this further, but this exactly drives home that kind of 80s sound that I really, really like. So if you have any questions or any comments that you want to make, just let me know in the comment section below, or feel free to DM me on Instagram if you want some more direct information. I'll try to help anyone out as best as I can. But other than that, I hope everyone learned something, and I hope everybody enjoyed watching me create this. And yeah, until next time, peace out, everyone. Have a good one.